The grand philosophical convocation of Velthari drew the finest thinkers of 40 civilizations every 25 years. It was the oldest academic institution in coalition history. 12,000 years of documented intellectual discourse, housed in a building made of materials that predated most spacefaring civilizations. Professor Velthari of the Drovar Academy had been invited to chair the plenary session on the question, "What constitutes a civilization worthy of the stars?" He had not expected the human delegation to contribute anything of note. Dr. Amara Osei-Bonsu was 34 years old, barely past childhood by the standards of several species in the room. She had been selected as Earth's representative because of her published work on comparative philosophy, which Velthari had reviewed and assessed as promising for a young species. He called on her third, expecting a brief and politely forgettable contribution. She stood up. "I want to begin," she said, "by agreeing with most of what's been said today." A brief pause while translators caught up across the room. "You've argued that civilizations worthy of the stars must have achieved philosophical consensus, long-term thinking, and stable ethical frameworks. These are good criteria." She looked around the room. Humanity meets none of them, murmuring, "We don't have philosophical consensus. We have roughly 4,000 documented philosophical traditions, many of which contradict each other fundamentally. We don't have long-term thinking. Our institutions rarely plan beyond decades, sometimes beyond years. We don't have a stable ethical framework. Our moral positions have changed dramatically even within a single century." She paused. "By your criteria, we should not be here." Velthari leaned forward. This was not the response he'd expected. "And yet," Amara continued, "I want to propose a different criterion." She touched a control and brought up a simple image above the presentation surface. A photograph of a hospital room. In it, a human doctor sat beside an alien patient, holding their hand, even though the alien's biology made them uncomfortable to touch. The doctor's expression was one of complete focus and compassion. "This photograph is from the first year of coalition integration," she said. The doctor had never treated a non-human patient. The patient had never been treated by a human. Neither of them had a protocol. Neither of them had a framework. She let the image sit. The doctor sat there anyway, for 6 hours, because they understood that the patient was afraid, and that being present mattered. The room was quiet. "My civilization has never had consensus," Amara said. "We have argued about every fundamental question, the nature of consciousness, the source of morality, the purpose of existence, for as long as we've been able to write things down. We have never agreed." She looked at Velthari directly. "But I would argue that the arguing is the philosophy. That a civilization that is still asking the fundamental questions, that has not locked its answers into crystallized doctrine, is perhaps more suited to the unending strangeness of the universe than one that believes it has found the answers." She sat down. The silence lasted considerably longer than usual after a speaker finished. It was ancient scholar Velthari of the Illyrian order, a being who had attended every convocation for 9,000 years, who finally spoke. His voice carried the weight of a civilization so old it remembered when several species in the room had been primitive. "In 12,000 years of this convocation," he said slowly, "no speaker has ever argued that uncertainty is a philosophical virtue." He looked at Amara across the chamber. "It is the oldest philosophical debate in this institution, whether the highest civilization is one that has found its answers, or one that never stops searching." A long pause. "The last person to argue the searching side as eloquently as you just did was a Drovar philosopher, 4,000 years ago. He was expelled from the academy for it." Amara looked at him. "What happened to his ideas?" "They became mandatory curriculum 300 years after his death." Velthari made a sound that his species used for a very quiet laugh. "As is traditional." The Convocation's final statement, published every 25 years as the collective intellectual position of coalition civilization, included, for the first time in its 12,000-year history, a section on the philosophical value of unresolved questioning. The footnote crediting its origin read, Dr. A. Osei-Bonsu, Human Delegation, year 12,447. The youngest contributor to ever significantly alter the document's content. Velthari wrote her a letter of apology. She wrote back thanking him for the challenge. She kept the correspondence framed in her office until she died, alongside a copy of the 4,000-year-old expelled philosopher's work. Humans, she had learned, were in good company.